Forensic investigators of Reddit, what are some of the most disturbing and horrific cases you've worked on? EMT. Not my call but my co-workers. Get dispatched for vaginal bleeding. Arrive at the home to find a woman sitting in a pool of blood on her bedroom floor. Transport her to the hospital where the doc examines her. He asks where the baby is. What? He states this woman just had a baby. So they go back to the home with police and search the place. My co-worker looks under the bed and sees a bowling ball bag. Opens the bag and finds a strangled dead baby. I do fire investigation, and one that stuck with me was a likely mentally disturbed girl started speaking to God at the dinner table and then that night lit her room on fire with her in it. I think about that one a lot. I'm an expert in work-related incidents, and I'm hired to investigate accidents and incidents for large corporations. 2 children fell down an elevator shaft on a building project. Employee of manufacturer in the pharmaceutical industry got his arm ripped off by a powder centrifuge. Retired person was fatally hit by the coupling of a compressed air hose after the hose broke. Had a paranoid schizophrenic male who forced his elderly mother to eat rocks, and I mean a shitload of rocks, to the point where she died. He told police that he was feeding her rocks to weigh her down, so God couldn't take her yet. Worked a case involving 2 young sisters, 13 and 6, if I recall. This was 20 years ago, and their meth head mom and her boyfriend. Mom was convinced her girls were possessed by demons, so she forced them to take baths in bleach. When that didn't work, she started making them drink bleach. The older girl knew enough to immediately throw up the bleach, and she would drag her sister behind the couches or wherever they could in the house to throw it up. Eventually the little daughter couldn't throw it up anymore and died. She then froze the little sister and proceeded to hack the frozen body into pieces in front of the older sister and then disposed of the pieces somehow. We were sent in to see if we could find the body. Walking into that house, the smell of bleach was overwhelming, and I can still remember all the bleach stains on the carpet. Edit. For those asking about the sentence, here is a link to the story. Changed age of girls from 8 and 4 to 13 and 6. Gotta be the guy that stabbed his newborn and 4-year-old before slitting his throat and jabbing the knife into his chest. The worst part was his phone on the bed with numerous texts from his fiancée and mom begging him to not harm the children. A man decapitated his infant son with a samurai sword while high on PCP. That's up there for me. I had one case where a mentally ill guy killed his ex-wife and was driving around school to school in the city looking for his kids to kill then kill himself. He didn't know which schools his kids attended, and there are many in the city. My girlfriend is a city school teacher. When I learned this was happening I called her and told her to lock everything. I've never been so scared in my life. Client committed suicide by connecting zip ties around neck and pulling. Frantic scratch marks indicated they regretted the action, but could not cut the zip ties due to Sharp's restriction. Sharp's restriction enforced due to recent morbid self-mutilation. Claw marks on neck and lack of oxygen to the brain was the saddest I've ever seen. The inability to say the individual died on their own terms is often the only bright side to any type of suicide I deal with. I was on the scene of a crash where a drunk mother went off the highway into the central median, which was basically a ditch. She hit a support column for a bridge and her 2 daughters, 6 and 8, were ejected. The 6-year-old was dead on the scene and the 8-year-old died in the helicopter on way to the hospital. Mom lived, of course. The impact was so hard that I was standing about 300 yards away with the car's battery at my feet. When Dad found out, he attempted to attack Mom in the hospital. Unfortunately, police were there to clear her to go to jail and stop the dad. Recently read a story about a lady's boyfriend who beat her 3-year-old son constantly, then finally to death. After he defecated on the carpet, he wasn't being fed and was eating out of the garbage. The mother said she slapped him to wake up and stop pretending he was dead like he usually does after a beating. Once she realized he was dead, she gave him a bath, went to put on her makeup and wig, then began to read the Bible to him before taking him to the hospital. A mildly overweight man had a heart attack and died on his waterbed. It broke and the sun heated the water, this is Arizona by the way, and cooked him like a fucking stew. In court, back a few years there was a guy high on PCP that thought his 5-month-old was possessed by the devil and then crucified them to the wall with screwdrivers. Okay, this dates back many years to my time as a US Army CID criminal investigator. I was working a fraud case against a soldier, whom I'll call Sturgis, who had been collecting housing allowance, but actually living in his car. Total was about $11,000, so it's not like he was looking at prison time or anything. Worst case scenario was a dishonorable discharge. But his company's made a hobby out of making this guy's life miserable while the investigation was going on. He personally escorted the guy to all his meetings with me, the JAG office, and other than that he was basically on full lockdown. One day they had an extended field exercise, still on base, but sleeping in tents for a few days and doing, I dunno, infantry stuff. When they got back to the company grounds, everyone lined up at the arms room turning their M16s and other various weaponry, but Sturgis instead walked out into the middle of the parade ground and sat down. The Zo came out after him, yelling all the way about what a world of shit he was going to rain down on him. Sturgis stood up and shot him full auto with ammo he pocketed from the range, stitched him from groin to neck. Then Sturgis sat back down and put the muzzle to his eye socket and held the trigger down for as long as he could. Once the duty agent who got the call put together who the cast of characters was, he called me, since I had the existing case file. When I got there the Zo's body was gone. They'd taken him to the Urbit Doa. Sturgis they didn't bother with, since his head looked like a deflated basketball. Turned out that the bullet from his rifle went right through his brain and shattered the top of his skull, and the muscle gas pushed his brain completely out of his skull. One perfect hemisphere was laying next to him, the other a surprisingly long distance away, and had landed in an anthill and was crawling with ants. I used a tongue depressor to roll the loose parts of Sturgis into a plastic bag. His autopsy was the next day, and I attended to take photographs for the file. Not a personal thing. That was almost 30 years ago, and I can still hear the medical examiner say, "Ugh, there's fucking ants all over this thing." Like, sorry dude, was that the thing that made this job too real for you? Long story short, arson case. 2 kids die. Lady who started the fire also lived in the house, but got kicked out by the owners for whatever reason. She had a previous felony arson charge. They found her a few days later living with her boyfriend in a tent with multiple gas cans. She was arrested and released with charges completely dropped. That's when I realized 1. How fucked our judicial system truly is, and 2. I didn't want to investigate homicides anymore.